Welcome, everyone, to the Polarian series of webinars. Today's presentation, Agile Requirements and Testing for Continuous Software Delivery. Thank you for joining us, and we will commence shortly. We are pleased to have with us our guest presenter today, Diego Ladudice, Vice President and Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. Diego has been with Forrester since 2005. Diego primarily contributes to and advises on Forrester's offerings for application development and delivery professionals. He partners with Forrester's global application leaders and is a leading expert on SDLC processes and practices, covering topics such as Agile development, Agile lean and lean transformations, Agile development sourcing strategies and services, Agile testing practices and tools, DevOps, and software testing and quality, with a key focus on systems of engagement. Diego also covers software delivery metrics, artificial intelligence, and open source governance. Also joining us today is Jerzy Ralek, Vice President, Product Management for Polarian Software. Jerzy brings over 10 years of experience in software product management and engineering to Polarian, where he is responsible for the product roadmap and product management. His unique mix of technical acumen and business savvy enables him to translate market needs into enterprise-grade solutions that are proven to help Polarian customers accelerate collaboration, integrity, and innovation. Welcome to both Diego and Jerzy, and now I would like to turn the agenda over to Diego. Welcome, Diego.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thanks, everybody, for being on this call. So this is a global hello to both sides of the world, for those in the U.S. and those in Europe, and I guess some in Asia-Pac, as I see. Today, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things here in 30 minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jerzy. There's, on one side, I'd like to talk about the role of how software is, the role of software in the changing world, in this changing world, and how also the techniques for developing, delivering, testing software is changing with that. And on the other side, I also want to spend some discussion around how Agile, because that's one of the modern techniques that I will be talking about, how Agile development and continuous delivery can actually survive in environments where there's more compliance, where there's more restriction, like systems of systems markets. So let me get going here. And there's a big change that has been going on in the marketplace for the last 40 years. Past 40 years, we've gone through a number of technology waves. Let's say major ones. Mainframe. I think you all know what software was developed there and what type of delivery cadence we had with mainframes. Client server. In the 80s, basically we brought more productivity to the PC, to the front end of the office, to employees, let's say. And in the 80s, with internet, new giant companies to the market, the Amazons, the Googles, and basically we brought more external access to our applications, e-business developed and so forth. Now, since 2010, we've actually, in Forrester, we believe, we've entered a new age, and we call it the age of the customer, which means customers and business users are empowered, with mobile, with tablets, and empowered by software. In other words, we kind of do almost a lot, we do a lot of things by using software that run either on our, for work or for our own private life. So in the age of the customer, we are building what we call systems of engagement that are applications that are attractive, that are nice to use, they delight, and they retain us engaged into the application. And basically, we see these systems as being the ones that are helping businesses get new clients, retain and serve existing clients themselves. But the big difference in all these ages is really about that delivery cycle time that you see here on the left side. And what's happening is that we see the delivery cadence. It means the release cycle time is dramatically going down. It's going down from the usual typical, 12 to 18 months that we might have had up into the 80s. down to a matter of months. I think right now, the average is around 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps, in the market. But there are companies that are actually delivering in a matter of hours and even seconds, delivering new features to production every few seconds, like Amazon, which is capable of delivery, which it delivers, not capable. It delivers already features every 11.6 seconds. So the big difference in this new age is in this new era, this technology era, is that there is a really and truly an unprecedented level of speed and quality that is required. And so that's the big difference. And so the question really is, how do we cope with that with our development and delivery techniques that we've partially, I would say, succeeded so far. The other important thing is that in the age of the customer, basically we feel in Forrester that modern applications will truly rule the world. And they're already around us, right? My Mercedes has software that tells me when I'm tired that I should stop and take a coffee. It really does that. Maybe in England it might suggest a cup of tea, but in Italy it suggests a coffee. Virgin Atlantic hostess use Google Glasses to welcome their VIPs in the lounges, and they have a lot of context around that VIP coming in. They know where he's going, they know where he's coming from, what type of ticket he bought. So basically he can be nicely babysitted and made comfortable in the lounge as much as possible and close to his needs. Banks, or this is just an example here, Westpac has organized around the customer, we say, so has in place a digital strategy that they've been implementing and deploying, where one of the key goals is to provide a uniform and consistent customer experience across the different channels, so that clients, when they go to the office, to the buildings themselves, or they access through the web, or they access through the internet, or the mobile phone, they get a great experience and consistently a great experience. But there's also company in industries more industrial type of markets like Rolls-Royce or General Electric Aviation, that don't think that they are in the business of building airplane engines anymore. What they do, they think, they've also gone through a digital transformation, and they feel they're now in the business of serving and helping clients fly from point A to point B and helping them save gasoline in that route. Engines and airplanes have, tons of sensors. They can download tons of data. They actually elaborate and compute that data online. They monitor the data, and they can provide that feedback to the airline. So the point I'm trying to make is that modern applications are having an impact across all industry. There is no industry that is not immune to this, and it's digitally, the digital disruption, we're all feeling it with different intensity perhaps, but it's happening across all industries. So what are modern applications? Just to kind of go a little bit behind the curtains here. Well, they're made of systems of engagement, which are systems that run on mobile. They integrate with social media and search type capabilities, so that they can support sales and marketing for doing cross-selling of products, for example. And applications embed these in. They carry a lot of context around the people and the customers that that are using them, or a system that is using them. And these can be B2B as well, of course. The big characteristic is that they have unknown requirements when they're initially built, and they require frequent changes, which also means that they also require frequent delivery. So the cadence in the delivery cycle for systems of engagement is a fast one. Compared to systems of record, which I think you all know what a systems of record is. If you're in a bank, it's your core banking system. In an automotive industry, it could be an ERP or supply chain. Here, the changes are there's less change happening, longer delivery cycles, and some of these organizations might be modernizing their back-end systems, bringing them on the cloud. There's some work that we do in that space, but largely, more traditional type of development approach. And the third area is what we call systems of automation, which is more actually almost in any industry with the Internet of Things, if you want. But if in the manufacturing space, it might be, lots of embedded, where the consumption of or the utilization of the APIs of these embedded systems are, might have to change frequently. Of course, you can't deploy and deliver chips with the frequency that you could deliver software every 11.6 seconds, and that's not even a need, but you can deploy, and you might want to deploy software on those chips that fast. So the point is that a modern application can be a combination of all this, where one area might be prevalent versus the other one, depending on the type of industry that you're in. So that gives you an idea here. And I guess what this means is that in order to deliver modern applications like this that I'm just talking about, you really have to act more as a software company, more and more as a software company. So besides the typical, 5 nines, availability, reliability, and having, quality and security, you still have those requirements. Those requirements are stringent, they're important, and you have to deliver those. But on top of those, what's happening is that you will also need to deliver things. You will need to pay a lot of attention to things like user experience. So that becomes an absolute requirement, right? We talked about applications that have to be liked by your end users. They have to engage the end users. The experience has to be differentiating, and more and more. You have to get used to delivering on a higher number of releases, which means more release. If you shorten the release cycles of the software, you're going to be dealing with more releases, right, in a year. Companies go from 4, 5, 8, 10 releases to 500 releases. I mean, we've seen that transition in some organizations already happen. You will have to refactor your architecture. Those of you that have already modernized and introduced service-oriented type architectures, decoupling, those siloed architectures in the back end are definitely going to have a competitive advantage, because those flexibility on the architectural side helps bring more flexibility in the process and in the delivery process and development and delivery process that you need to put in place in the new market of delivering modern applications. And last but not least, you do have to, there's better quality, better software delivered faster. You need an excellent software engineering group. So you need more engineering skills. You need designers and developers that are better and great at delivering software. Now, whether you have them internally, you have them at, you use external partners, that is a different story, and you might be using different assessment and partnership techniques, but that's key. So let's look at a couple of trends in the Agile space and how we can address and adopt some of the techniques that I see happening and being adopted purely in the software world, of course. For those of you coming from the systems world, it might be slightly different, but that's what I'm going to focus on now, which is really, if Agile, yes, is being adopted more in the software world, but there's also a lot of interesting things that industries and companies coming from the systems world are also doing. So first of all, you can see that out of this global software survey that we did this year, you can see that 41% of the developers are using Agile, some form of Agile methodology or process. And second, that the methodology that is mostly used are the methodologies that are mostly used are hybrid, Agile, waterfall, followed by Scrum. Now, when you look at these numbers, as I did with a survey, just focusing on those doing Agile, you'll find that one of the most common Agile frameworks used is Scrum, like at 90%. But anyway, this is the picture, right? Agile adoption, and it's growing. We're seeing these numbers improving. They have been improving year over year. Another trend that you might have heard of is DevOps. For me, that really is Agile all the way through. It's Agile on the operations side. We've focused a lot on Agile in the upstream, I call it, and in introducing alignment with the business and introducing frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, and so forth. But what we also need to do, and this is currently what the industry is focusing on as well, besides improving Agile in the upstream, is introducing more Agile in the downstream. In other words, for example, debunking that wall that exists between development and operations, so that the goals that you've set with your business to improve things and to implement requirements faster can actually get deployed as well, and don't hit the wall, in between from development to operations. And so really what the DevOps is it's a movement that encourages shared goals between operations and development, and those shared goals are business goals, so they share the same business goals, and teams have to realize that. That helps, align them. It means also coming up with one life cycle rather than a process that is separated and which has handovers and interruptions in between. Everyone involved in releasing business value, and that process, that life cycle that we try to streamline is also being implemented with more automation. There's a huge opportunity for automating this process because at the end of the day, it's always the same process, and it's just a matter of standardizing and doing some cleanup, but you can really automate a lot out of this. So tooling will help. Tooling can help to get to this level of automation. So when it comes to the adoption, what we're really seeing in Forrester, and the prior numbers kind of showed this when they talked about Agile, hybrid Agile, is that many are adopting what we coined in Forrester 2 years ago as water scrumful. And this is actually, is one of the things I think would work better, that works even better in some of the enterprises and organizations. And water scrumful is not necessarily a bad thing if it's done right. It can be absolutely an impediment and if it's interpreted in the wrong way. And the right way is kind of showed in this bit of a picture that has a lot of things on it, but I'll explain, I'll try to explain it and make it clearer. So first of all, enterprises do need there's lots of planning that has to happen before you can kick off a sprint and a project with Agile. That planning doesn't go away. You need to define business cases, high-level requirements. In Agile, we call them epics. You need to do planning of the releases that you think that you're going to be deploying and how many sprints they're going to have, and you're going to start planning doubling down into the initial sprints. But when it comes to refining and designing the requirements, that's when the work starts to be executed in the sprints. You cannot have requirements done all up front and have a nice document finished with 150 pages and say, okay, we've figured everything out, go develop. That's what has to change. The requirements really have to get into this cycle of iteration with the business, with the development team, with the BAs, program managers, whatever roles you need at the enterprise level, and you align them, and basically they get into that routine of the sprint, which might be 2 or 4 weeks. And in that sprint, we also pull testing all the way to the left. So testing starts right in the sprint. There's all the ceremonies that you might be adopting from Agile, stand-ups and retrospectives and so forth. But testing has to happen. And when you are done with the sprint in the 2 weeks, then you can either deploy that software into production or you can deploy it onto a staged environment. So if you deploy it into a staged environment, you are implementing what I call scrumful, and that's okay. It works as long as it's tested and it's ready to go as if it was, ready to go into production. And you're implementing water scrum in the sense that you are doing planning. We like planning in Agile. You have to do planning, but you are iterating on the requirements. You're allowing change to be part of the process, and that's really key. So that's kind of at a high level what water scrumful is. It is, I say water scrumful, but it's actually Scrum with XP and other techniques. And so basically what happens is that there's lots of planning that's happening in Agile, and you'll see that this is all handy for those compliance issues that you might have. And there's also something that is not defined in Scrum, but enterprise Agile teams use, which is called Sprint Zero, where you define like the environment for your tools. You define you groom the backlog. You prepare everything so that when the sprint kicks off, you can actually start doing all the activity that needs to be done, and so that you can drop working software in fast delivery cadence. And that planning happens at the release level, it happens at the sprint level, and there's updating going on. So if those that might think that there is not much planning and it can't work in a compliance world because in an enterprise world where there's complexity, well, that's how some of the teams are adopting Agile to make it work. So when you look at Agile and compliance, really, here are some examples. I don't have time to go through all of them, but And we actually did this research quite a few years ago. But what's happening is that, Agile teams are kind of adapting some strategies to deal with compliance. There is a wealth of documentation that is produced. You do document your epics. You do document. It's true that you break up the requirements in a different way than you're used to, and you do them in an iterative way, but you do write them. You do have documentation through the tools. The tools do provide various levels of information that can be stored, logged, and accessed. And also for testing. In testing, Agile actually changes quite radically, and there's more testing done than in a waterfall approach, and that testing can be documented. You can enhance the user stories if they are too light in the way they're typically used. You can, there's sprint zero where you start where you can add and you can enhance and define how you're going to be validating your requirements. With testing starting from the beginning, you can define user acceptance criteria that help define a definition of done. There's a number of things that Agile teams do in addition to what's written in the books around Scrum and Kanban, and that map into Agile and make it work, even when you have compliance. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. And even from defects, for example, just to pick another example, you need that traceability. Well, backtracking tools, bug tracking tools are used. They're connected to the backlog. And actually, I would say that in some cases, keeping track of bugs becomes less of an issue because in Agile, the policy is that as soon as a bug comes, you fix it. You don't start building a backlog of bugs that will be dealt with later. They have to be dealt kind of into the same sprint. And so, one big change that enterprises need to do is forget about the division of labor between new development and maintenance. It's the team. Each team takes on as if it was a product, and they evolve the product, and they're in charge for the new development, for the enhancements, and everything. So that kind of changes some of the needs, and that process change also kind of makes things more available in terms of data. And one smart thing that I've seen in heavy compliance world Agile teams doing is they also get to, they work with the audits and with the officials that do the auditing so that these guys understand what's going on. The issue, for some of these folks is they don't really know and understand how Agile works, and so explaining the process, showing all the documentation that is produced or can be produced in parallel really helps that collaboration with the officials so that you can, tear some impediments down and move on with your Agile adoption. There's a few more areas that I wanted to focus on to complete my piece here is, and that's another key area that I hear a lot of issue let's say or skepticism around is integration. Integration can be a big impediment to Agile. People think to delivering software fast, and it's especially in complex environments. So there's a few things that are improving in that space, and I want to briefly talk about them. One is automation. Of course, with automation, we've always tried to increase the level of test automation that we do, but where the industry is quite behind. There's 40% of organizations can't automate tests, more than 20% of their tests. They're actually below that. But those doing Agile, few of them are achieving automation testing the automations of their test, which goes well above 70%. Now, you don't need to test, you don't need, and you won't, and you can't automate 100% your test. First of all, because you've got legacy, and that's even harder. But in the new development, you can achieve higher levels of automation. And to do that, it's not just about tools. It's really more about the way you go for automation. Agile teams and continuous delivery teams are speeding automation by, for example, going beyond the graphical user interface. You need to do API automation testing. You need to test at the service level, and you can automate those because the graphical user interface changes too often. It breaks the test suites if you stay at that level, and it slows you down. But if you automate at the API level, the chances are that the process doesn't change as often as the user interface does, and you can achieve and you can go beyond and and look at the complexity of the application and automate more. It does. We talked about the fact that the better software engineering is needed, but even for testing, it's becoming more the job of a developer, which means that that's the way you can achieve more automation by shifting automation in the hands of more development-oriented type of roles. And then on the other side, standardizing test environments. Provisioning of test environments is another big issue that, of course, slows you down. And by the way, when you automate, that helps compliance too, because it's eliminating the errors that human beings can introduce in the process. And once it's done right, it's done right, it's documented, and so it cuts down the automation, the testing time. And then for the test provisioning side of things, there are some techniques so that the people are using tools to, for example, configure and version control the test cases, the test assets, the automation, the tools, so that they can easily deploy that packaged environment, that aggregation of assets when they need to in a very fast way through a deployment automation tool. Now, so that's one thing. The second thing is, and automation is crucial, by the way, because of course, if you still do a lot of manual testing, you're going to slow down your release cadence, your team's speed. So that's an area that you really need to focus on if you want to increase the delivery cycles and you want to deliver software faster and better. The other area specifically around integration testing is, we all recognize we have these complex architectures with many different protocols, access to mainframes, access to maybe, legacy of other kinds through message queues, and there's different web services perhaps, and databases, and access to third-party services, and composite applications kind of do that all behind the scenes. And the question is, when it comes to dropping a new software component in that complex environment and integrating and making sure that the integration is working, is pretty hard. It's challenging, right? And so that's where new emerging technology like service virtualization comes in. And service virtualization really is a kind of a simulation concept. It's really like creating what we call, like a wind tunnel that is created for testing airplanes. We don't test airplanes by flying them. They're tested in this wind tunnel where all the conditions are created and simulated. Well, that's the same kind of concept that we can adopt with service virtualization. Basically, you can simulate a lot of the complexity of the production environment, creating stubs. The tool does this for you. So today, maybe your developers are creating stubs. They're wasting time doing that because it's replicated, many developers are doing the same stub perhaps, but also that stub is not going to be really aligned with the production environment. So service virtualization tools align the production environment in the test environment so that now you can test against an environment that is more stable, more aligned to your production environment. There is a very expensive way you can do that, right? You just get the whole hardware and the whole stack and you just duplicate it, and then you say, okay, so this is my test environment. Well, that's very expensive. Service virtualization, the tools are quite expensive too, but the business case is much, much more convenient because the costs are lower. And of course, you do need skills to do that. So anyway, I did also publish a report on service virtualization and testing for those of you that might want to go on the Forrester website and download it and read it. But basically, this technology really helps you automate integration testing and also do testing in areas where you've got complexity, where you've got services that are not reachable because they're on a mainframe. And by virtualizing that asset that you need to test that's sitting on the mainframe and bringing it in your own environment, you have it now available all the time. So it really helps that delivery cycle time that I was talking, cutting down the testing delivery cycle time. Now, for those of you in the manufacturing space, and this is my last slide, and I'm done. This technology, I think, is also, and it's being used in some cases for even in that world, so that what happens is you can virtualize your APIs of the embedded systems and use that virtualization in a pure software environment where you can apply a faster ALM cycle. Now, there is also other things that are going on in the systems world, which is, aligning more the ALM with a PLM. That's a long-term goal, and there are some results, that are going to be achieved over the years and even short-term. But basically, you could also apply service virtualization. You can virtualize the complexity of the hardware in a software environment, and you can test, and you can test that environment fast, and you can that cuts down, the time that it takes you to get from design to delivery to the testing to deployment. The other great thing about service virtualization is that you can also generate from design the code, some of the interfaces, so that you can test also against design. And that's really handy in Agile, where you've got multiple teams and dependency among the teams. If a team is behind schedule, or it's scheduled not to be yet at development and it's still in the design phase, your team is, waiting for that component. Basically, you can be provided a simulated asset of that component, which is designed, maybe, a simulation of the WSDL, and basically test and move forward. And so that all helps in a complex heterogeneous environment. It helps remove some of the barriers for speeding up your development. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Iri, and I really thank you for the attention, and here for questions later on. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen now. Thank you, Diego, for a fantastic presentation about Agile Requirements and Testing. And let me be a bit more practical now and give you 5 top reasons to deploy Polarion ALM for enterprise Agile development. For those who do not know Polarion, let me just very quickly introduce Polarion Software. Polarion Software is a leading innovator in web-based requirements management and quality assurance and ALM solutions since our first product release in 2004. And unique differentiators include the fact that Polarion ALM is based on a single unified artifact repository orchestrated by a powerful workflow engine, and it's a 100% web-based solution. This enables to streamline collaboration, transparency, and release predictability, as well as regulatory standards compliance. Let's go straight into my part. And the first reason is Agile development and complete requirements management solution in one single platform. It means, as any other Agile solution, we really provide a full support for a full Agile process. And we start with a product and release backlogs. You can manage any number of artifacts from epics, user stories to low-level tasks and even source code. We give you a nice status update of your project, with nice burn-down and burn-up charts. And we do it not just for a single project, but across any number of projects. It enables multi-level prioritization. At the same time, Polarion provides the complete requirements management solution with a very unique document-like interface for writing specifications. You can import Office documents, export them back. Simply, it provides you all the features that are common in modern requirements management solutions. One can ask, why do you need requirements, or why do we need requirements if you have user stories? Software projects are getting more complex every day. You hear about 20 million lines of code just in car multimedia systems. You've probably already realized that it's not possible to rely on the software code itself and individual understanding of the product as the only way for the project documentation. So you need to start speaking about supported documentation, like component specification documents. So you need to understand the difference between requirements and the user stories. The primary reason for the specification documents is to manage the complexity of your projects and to ensure the consistency, not just the functional consistency, but also the design consistency, the user interaction consistency. There is no way you can do it for 20 million lines of code without any supported documentation. What is very important for those specification documents is that they are maintained when done. On the other hand, the concept of a backlog, power of a user story that describes the increment, to clearly focus on the user story, on the use case, or the value it brings to the user. This is really all great. So what is important is to understand that you can more or less discard the user story when it is implemented, as it really describes just the functional increment, so there can be another story that overrides the first one. So as it is important to have a potentially shippable product at the end of the sprint, you also need to have the updated product documentation. It doesn't really matter much if the product documentation is being prepared before you start working on the user stories. What is essential is that all this information is kept consistently at the end of the sprint. So component specifications are the outcome of the sprint as well as the application itself, the code, and updated grouped product backlog. The reason number 2, accelerate integrity with unified quality management solution. Integrity is the ability of the software to maintain correctness and harmony among all related pieces of data. It's not just to test it, but really to ensure the consistency, the quality. As you probably know, there is an exponential dependency between the cost, the time we pay to fix an issue, and the moment when the issue was actually fixed. We see that customers do not rely on a single provider for testing tools, especially for automation, for test automation. Sometimes the tests are at least plugged into continuous integration process and the team receives an email on the result, but what tests are executed and when? How you can execute all the tests on each commit if performance and load tests take hours? Scheduling and balancing the test execution to get the important information as soon as possible is the biggest objective of continuous integration and testing. Let me show you how our customer Fujitsu has organized the source code quality assurance. It confirms that Fujitsu, as many other organizations, do not rely on one single vendor of quality assurance tools. We see that continuous integration and testing also include elements such as static source code analysis or code metrics. All the results are imported into Polarion and transparently available to all the stakeholders. It's not only to give a proof that the verification routines pass for regulatory bodies, but also to simplify the access to the results and speed up the process. For any kind of a test failure, the issue is automatically created and assigned. It massively reduces the time to start working on the issue. You probably know the dependency from the previous slide. So there is a big difference if you receive an email or if the task appears in your task list. Possibly automatically linked to the requirement that caused the issue, this might save several days comparing to situations that email have to be manually processed. So we call it a test hub. Polarion provides a central place for quality assurance solution. So there is the same instant processing for all the test issues. No matter if this is a performance test, a static source code analysis failure, it's all the same issue, the same workflow process associated and assigned to a developer. And of course, you have a full traceability from the issues to the test cases to user stories and to requirements. Reason number 3, easier to manage compliance with regulations and standards. When speaking about compliance, there are 2 kinds of requirements. One that are related to the technology itself. We provide features that are required by different standards, such as electronic signatures, but we also provide support for the actual functional safety processes, such as ISO 26262 or DO 178, with various project templates. Polarion is also certified as a trusted tool for ISO 26262 development. And when we were actually passing the certification with TÜV Nord, they told us that we were the first Agile-based company who passed this full ISO 26262 audit. And we confirmed with that it's not important to have all the requirements and the design elements to be designed up front, but what is really important is that when the project is really finished, all the requirements or the project documentation needs to be available, the verification scenarios needs to be traceable, and of course also the source code changes are verified and traceable. Information reuse and variant management, the reason number 4. Statistics says that 70 to 80% of requirements are being reused between different versions or different variants of your project. You need to show regulatory requirements across all your running projects. You need to manage commonalities between your variants, so you don't need to apply a change manually in all the different projects where you manage your product variants. And of course, if you do it properly, you can save a lot of time on managing those variants and versions. And here I think it's again important to show you a practical example. So for the component specification, what you do not want to do is to distribute the changes manually to ensure the consistency of the component specifications between variants. So copy and paste the actual descriptions from one place to the other. In modern requirements management solutions, you can write so-called 150% specification that contains all the common requirements, And you have the variant specifications exposing the shared requirements and documenting just the differences. On the other hand, the user story backlog, the variant backlog, is the complete opposite. As the user stories describe just the increments, you really just document the specifics you need to implement for each variant, or if it is a common change, you plan it just once. It doesn't mean that each story I have for a variant A should appear in the backlog of variant B, because the addition is automatically propagated and added to the second variant. And reason number 5, handle complexity, but Plarium is still easy on users. You know, in these days, a lot of companies, and all the software companies are speaking about easy on users, how easy are their applications for users. But what we find out is that it's very important to always concentrate also on efficiency. So, I mean, is it that easy and that easy to enter data no matter how many projects you manage with the system? No matter how far you are in your application workflow, no matter how many users are working with the system, there's so many different solutions that are pretty nice if you have a small agile project, but once you get your projects more complex, once we start speaking about 20 million lines of code, they fail. Very likely, like Martina won the gold medal on last Olympic Games, as she was really able to keep the speed for all the 5,000 meters. So with Plarium, we don't concentrate just on easy on user, even though we have customers saying that this is one of the base reasons why they decided for Plarium, but we also value in the same way transparency and efficiency. As the transparency is really the way how people can collaborate better, it gives the trust to the system, and efficiency ensures that the system is not just easy, but also it enables to execute all the use cases no matter how many projects or data you manage with the AON solution. So now let's have a time to answer your possible questions. So please use the Q&A panel if you haven't done so far, and I will just open it and I will moderate the session now. So, Diego, the first question there is back on the slide it shows the methodology percentages. Did the 30 person who said they followed no methodology give any reasoning, background on that?
Yeah, I know, it is scary, as the attendee says. So there's a couple of things to say around that. One is that, when the developers interviewed are doing also maintenance, and there's a lot of maintenance work going on, as you know. Actually, if you look at the numbers, sometimes maintenance in some companies is higher than new development. And when that maintenance is really small maintenance with lots of fixes and changes, and there are large institutions that do a lot of that, they typically really don't use any methodology. Now, I see that changing, because while Scrum is not very well suited for that, Kanban is, which is a lean technique to manage flow. So you can think of maintenance hitting you as the number of high volume of and big flow of requests. That's one thing. The second thing is these guys, some of the others that are actually, not necessarily in the maintenance space, is that they do have an approach. They do use some sort of informal methodology. They just don't know, or they don't kind of have it defined and decided and communicated at the enterprise level. But I agree. I mean, it's I think when that does tell us also that we need to do a better job in companies to communicate what we standardize on and have people use more of it.
Thank you, Diego. There is one related question. This is, what is the difference between the iterative V model and the waterfall Scrumfall?
I don't know what the iterative V model is. I saw the V model collapse sometimes. Sorry, but I guess I think there is a. Well, if the iterative V model means, as I described, that you're doing planning right up front, but then you're really iterating over and iteratively, not necessarily incrementally, but iterating over requirements which are defined with minimum viable product in mind. And you are in 2-week sprints, you're actually delivering working software code, which is, again, not necessarily deployed, but it's at least delivered into a staged environment. Then if that's what the iterative V model is, then I guess it's the same. So the point is, Yeah. So the point is you are still sticking to the 2-3 weeks iterations and having that be kind of software that could be potentially deployed.
One other question. Some people think that it is enough to track test cases to ensure the consistency. Can you explain why we need to track also requirements and test cases? Maybe it's the question that I can answer as well later, Diego, but what do you think on user stories and test cases? Should you really track test cases separate with user stories, or should you document the verification procedures in the user story itself?
So there's a couple of approaches that are emerging there. One is there are companies that use a user acceptance test-driven approach, which means for each user story, you exactly explain what the user acceptance criteria is for that user story. That does two things. One, it actually gives the team and the developer a clear definition of done, right? If they're using Scrum, Scrum has this concept of a definition of done so that they know when the sprint is. Because the product is being developed in an iterative way, it's important. And so one way is actually to associate to the user stories a user acceptance criteria. And the other one is actually using a more modern technique like Cucumber or with a Gherkin language, which is using a higher level description language that is understood by the business analyst and the QA, which basically is kind of specifying the behavior. So it's almost the test requirement and the business requirement is embedded into that definition. Again, this is some of the more advanced approaches that I used, but I think that traceability, of course, is important.
Mm-hmm. Question to Polarian. Polarian does support any methodology, correct? Yes, of course. We do not stick to any agile or waterfall methodology. You can set up any process with Polarian workflow and project templates, but we also do provide the out-of-the-box templates for various methodologies such as Scrum or V-model-like templates. We have a support for XP, but most of our system deployments contain some kind of customization based on the actual customer needs. One more question to you, Diego. The question is, can the concept of user story be applied to embedded system development when there is sometimes no user, but just automated response? How to design user stories to cover such system development environments?
Right. So I guess, and you might help me here getting into the systems area, but basically, it's like use cases. When we used to write use cases years ago, and we still do write use cases, I guess there's a lot of use of use cases still going on. The use might be, instead of a user, it might be a system. That interaction can be captured as a user story, I guess. It's because it's software talking to other software. If that's your business, then I think it actually becomes a good area to focus on, and that's actually how you kind of use this methodology in that world.
Yeah, I definitely confirm that. Yes, lots of customers from the system development area or embedded software development that do adopt agile techniques or agile methodologies. So they are on the transition from more the waterfall-like process to agile, and it's an ongoing transition. So I think what's great on agile is that you can really adopt techniques incrementally, such as continuous testing, continuous integration, iterative development. And the great thing about the user story is that it helps developers to understand why something is being planned. And this why is typically described as a user story, so it focuses on the user. But in case you are doing a system development, you definitely have other ways how to explain and give really the details why something is happening. Because if you are dealing with very smart engineers who can really do much better job if they understand the details. Rather than just being told the system requirements, what they need to implement, or even functional design. So this why is the story implemented. The story behind it is very important, no matter if you do software for user interaction or system interaction. I think that's it for now, Nancy. If there are any more questions, we can definitely answer them offline after the presentation. So I give it back to Nancy so she can wrap up the session. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sergi, and definitely thanks very much to Diego for joining us today. We hope you found the presentation informative. So again, thank you for joining us, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and also check out the Plarion blog at www.plarion.com as well. So again, thanks very much for sharing your time with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.